Let's go and let's find out what is SUBANEN or SUBANEN tribe. First, the table of the contents, the introduction, history, location, and culture. First of all, the SUBANEN are indigenous cultural communities scattered all throughout the Zamboanga Peninsula, which was originally named Sibugay and is located in West Mindanao. SUBANEN comes from the root word suba, which means river. The suffix nan, non, or nen indicates a locality or place of origin. Means those who live along riverbanks and coastal areas. Outsiders call them Subano, Subano, Subanon, or Subanun, depending on their accent. In publications, they are called Subanon, Subanun, or Subanen. Linguists use the spelling Subanen because it is phonetically close to the way the native speakers pronounce their ethnic name. For able to us to know who is or what was the SUBANEN tribe is, this was the picture, SUBANEN woman and a child, also the SUBANEN man. It was a National Geographic 1913, so it was taken by Mario Fer, Filipiniana Library. So, in the right side, you can see the group of SUBANEN tribe. This is the modern SUBANEN. So, their looks, their family, and their outfit. So now, in the second part of our report, the history of SUBANEN. In the prehistory of SUBANEN tribe, the SUBANEN were established in the island of Mindanao before 500 BC, before the Neolithic era or New Stone Age, were the period in the development of human technology taking place beginning 10,000 BC according to the Aspro chronology. So the evidence of old stone tools in Zamboanga del Norte may indicate a late Neolithic presence. Burial jars, both earthen and glaze, as well as Chinese celadons have been found in caves together with shell. So, evidently, there was a long history of trade between the SUBANEN and the Chinese long before the latter's contact with Islam. After that, early history, for some time before the Spaniards came during the period of colonial rule, the SUBANEN had trade contacts with the Tausug, Maguindanao, and Tamaranao. As they were under the protection of the Sultanate of Maguindanao, they also provide materials, warriors, and help in the war efforts of the Sultanate. They were also entitled to share in the war spoils. Now here we go in the Spanish colonial area. So the coming of the Spain to the Philippines as a colonial power complicated the picture. So the Spanish colonial government sought to extend its sovereignty over the whole of the southern Philippines, declaring its intention to protect the unchristianized non-Muslim SUBANEN of the Sibugay, now Zamboanga Peninsula. So the government under General Valeriano Weyler constructed a series of fortifications across the Tucuran Isthmus for the purpose of shutting out the Malanao Moros, so from the SUBANEN country, and preventing further destructive rays upon the peaceful and industrious peasants of these hills. Spanish military control of the Tucuran garrison and fortifications ended in 1899 under the terms of the Treaty of Paris. So after the Spanish colonial era, the American colonial era was the next. So before the American government could put in its occupation troops, surprised how the SUBANEN had willingly allowed the new colonizers to construct to their lands without a claymore or fight. The Moro from the lake region went across the isthmus and attacked the Subanen and battled Americans in the two districts of Zamboanga and Misamis to prove their intention to fight the Americans' intent to their territory. So these renewed raids took their toll of lives and property, and many Subanen were even carried off into bondage by the invaders. So the military garrison was taken over by Moro forces, and the Kota fort and the several villages were established on the isthmus for years. The place was abandoned, however, when the much American expeditionary forces appeared in October 1910. Then, after that, post-independence era. So despite the long history of hostile actions against them by their neighbors and foreign colonizer, the Subanen have managed to preserve their tribal unity and identification, their language and dialects, their costume and traditions, and their religious worldview. Subanen were co-founders of CMT Al-Alam before BIP Dahwa Tabligh in Mindanao. So since the beginning of the 20th century, the Subanen's contact with the outside world broadened to include the Visayan and the latter-day Chinese. Now, aside from the influx of these settlers and traders, there has been a massive penetration of the national government into the Subanen hinterlands for purposes of administrative control. So, like the tax assessment and collection, and police enforcement of national law, logging and mining concession that affects their way of life. So, here we are in the martial law era. So there is at least one major record of human rights violations against the Subanen people during the period of martial law under President Ferdinand Marcos, an incident that has been called the Tudela Massacre. So it was on August 24, 1981, members of a Marcos-sponsored paramilitary forces strafed the house of a Subanen family. So, the Gumapons in Sitio Gitason, Barrio Lampasan, Tudela, Misamis Occidental. 10 Subanen were killed in the incident, including a baby. It's so sad history. But lastly, after that, contemporary history. So it was in 1997, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act IPRA of 1997 was passed into law. So the law put in place a mechanism for the protection of the ancestral lands by indigenous cultural communities. So it was include the Subanen. Happily. And in the third part of my report is the location of Subanen tribe. So before that, we include the year and population of the Subanen tribe. So in 1912, there has a 47,164 Subanen. In 1988, there's a 300,000 Subanens. In 2019, there's a 867,012 Subanen. While practically the whole of Zamboanga has always been the ancestral domain of a Subanen, some areas of the peninsula are occupied by Muslims, and a few others by Christian settlers. The entire southern coastal region of Zamboanga del Sur, from the Basilan Strait to Pagadian, near Lanao, are populated by mixed Muslim groups or major urban concentrations such as Zamboanga City, Pagadian, and Dipolog have a sizable number of Christians. So it is because of the history of the Subanen. So last part of my report is about the culture. So it was a culture also to have prefer to have more daughters than son, because the father will be able to recover the dowry he paid for his wife, but these recent times dowry are no longer practiced. So that's why it was a culture that a marriage is arranged through parental understanding called buya, even before the parties reach the age of puberty or even after they birth. They are already married and would be introduced only once they are already at their legal age. But customary practice were no longer followed by the new generations. Also, the tribe has no religion, although it is believed that they had a holy book at one time. In marriage, the parents of the man look for a woman he will marry, and both sets of parents set the wedding date. So, polygamy and polyandry are practiced, but separation is not allowed, nor is marrying nearest relatives. In terms of the education among Subanen people was limited to instruction by the Timoy head to the future husband and wife regarding love, respect, and treatment of each other, parents, and in-laws. Though with increasing modernization, many of the Subanen are already highly educated. So some have received bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in universities both local and abroad. So some are employed in the government. Also, Subanen tribe do not practice division of labor based on gender. So both men and women work in the fields together, and men can cook and care for the children when necessary. They have little social stratification, so everyone is equal in the Subanen community because everyone has the same family for several years. If he cannot afford to pay the shamaya, it is considered a blessing to have more daughters than son, because the father will be able, like what I said, it will able to recover the dowry he paid for his wife. So this is general belief that all human beings should marry. So like I said earlier, the tribe has no religion. So in a marriage, the parents of the man look for a woman he will marry, and both set of the parents set the wedding date. So like the polygamy and polyandry are practiced, but separation is not allowed, nor is marrying nearest relatives. So when a couple wants to have only one or two children, the wife, after giving birth, eats an herb called benayan. So for birth and spacing, she eats two herbs, and if no more children are desired, she eats more. Another type of birth control is practiced by the midwife who manipulates the human after delivery. So it was a various method are practiced to predetermine the child's sex. So here it is, the pregnant woman must abide by many regulations, including placing a piece of wood across her path before going in a doorway. It is considered a blessing to have more daughters than son, because the father will be able to recover the dowry he paid for his wife. So there is a general belief that all human beings should marry. Thank you for listening. Bye.